howdy y'all. Welcome to Local Matters, where the constant horror of the federal government is replaced by the serene tranquility of your local oasis. The last time I was with you, we had James on again, and I've been ignoring your hate mail about James, right? Saying that this guy is terrible. Why do you constantly have him on? But I figured I'd give you guys a little bit of a break, so I have with me the unmatched Chloe Clark. And in case you're wondering, yes, she is featured in the latest Stan Lee comic book, because that is the biggest comic book superhero name ever. That is Chloe Clark. That is a Stan Lee comic book alter ego, which I know that Stan Lee's dead, rest in peace. But were he alive, he would put you into a comic book. Welcome to the show, Chloe.
Thank you. You can't reveal my secret identity
Your
right here to
secret
everyone.
identity.
That's a little rude.
Chloe Clark, but at night she's Spandex Girl.
Oh no.
Or she's no, it's not spandex, it's leggings. Right? Yeah, it's leggings.
Mm-hmm. That
That you can do.
Yes.
Right. What is the difference between spandex and leggings?
Well, when you think spandex, you think more like, your sisters played volleyball, the spandex.
They did. Okay,
my
so
leggings
spandex
are covering my whole leg.
Oh, hence the word leggings.
Legging.
I get it. Wonderful. Chloe Clark. That is a very fortunate name. So, I love poking at people's names. They're fun. Partially because I have regrets about my own name sometimes, but
It's the only reason I married him, was to get the last name.
Was to get the last name. Yeah, right.
Don't tell him that.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he knows. Anyway, for those of you that don't know, Chloe, again, kind of cheating, because she actually is married to my producer Hayden, and so that's how we got connected, man. This goes way back. That being said, Chloe, I've got you on here because I want to discuss with you some local matters, right? Hence the name of the show. I want to talk to you about what you do. So if you could tell the fine people what you do, that would just be outstanding.
Absolutely.
I would really love that.
Absolutely. So I teach special education in Plano ISD. I work with 3rd through 5th grade primarily, doing what we call resource and inclusion. So my kids you're going to see more high functioning autism, emotional disabilities, learning disabilities, but kids who are in the general classroom. And then for part of the day, they are with me, or I am in the class with them. So they are being supported by me, and some of their learning is completely in my hands, while some of their learning is completely in the hands of the general education teacher. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of so these kids are in certain regards kind of in with the general population of the school, but sometimes they have to go to you, and you're that kind of separate allocation for the specific needs that they have.
Yes, yep, and every kid has a different amount of time. I have my own classroom, so every kid has a different amount of time that they need to be in my class. For some kids, it's once a week for social skills. For some kids, it's an hour every day for reading.
So you have like a physical classroom that kids attend?
Yep.
What school specifically do you work at?
I work at Gullidge Elementary.
Gullidge Elementary.
Yes.
Okay. I really didn't know that was a Plano elementary school.
It
okay.
is.
So you work at Gullidge.
That's where I work.
Is that, well,
I can confirm.
I would assume as much, right? So you work at Gullidge, and is the general, I keep saying the general population, right? Is the general population of Gullidge attending school regularly?
So
Or is
the
it
last
all-
time that I looked at we had some statistics that we had looked at. It's roughly 50-50 right now, especially in my groups. It's about 50-50. I pull small groups, so I'll have like 3 kids in person and 3 kids on the computer teaching at the same time.
So what's and that's the case for the whole school?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
All right. So is there an official policy, or what's y'all's official, or are you just kind of playing it by ear? Are you letting the parents decide? What's up?
So we're letting the parents decide, and we send out at the beginning of each, we do 9-week grading periods. At the beginning of each 9-week grading period, or a couple weeks before that, the parents get a Google form that they get to fill out. Either, yes, I'm ready for my child to get out of the house and go back to school, or no, I don't feel like we are safe enough yet. We're going to keep them home and continue doing school online.
Good for you. Good for you. I mean, honestly, good for your school, because I think that's the way it should be done, right? And obviously, I try and keep my own political views out of things. Those that know me do know my political views, but I try and keep it off of this show. But it's pretty clear how I feel about federalism, right? And it's pretty clear how I feel about having large, over-the-top mandates that kind of just come down to all of us. I don't like those. I don't like those very much. And I think that boils down almost to an individual level when it comes to education, right? I feel like school is supposed to be a service. It's a service provided by the federal government. And this is going to sound kind of weird. I almost think like truancy laws are kind of odd. I don't know how I feel about truancy laws. Probably because I went to court for truancy when I was in high school.
I think that I did too.
I think, yeah, I went to court for truancy. Yes. And by the way, guys, I graduated like top of my class, like special, super awesome. And I don't know if there was top of your class. Well, you had to have top of your class in high school. But what was it? Distinguished achievement. Yeah, I graduated with distinguished achievement. I got a little. See, this is how great I am. I graduated distinguished achievement and then forgot it was distinguished achievement. No, but I got a little gold star on my diploma. I was super proud of myself.
Good.
I did, and I went to truancy court my senior year of high school, because I missed a bunch of first period swim practices. I was on the swim team. And they sent me to truancy court, and I got a big scolding from the judge, who just wagged his finger and told me about the value of an education. And I was like, I'm graduating distinguished achievement with a 3.6 or something. Like I had a really good GPA in high school. Now it went in the toilet in college. But I had a good GPA, and here I am sitting there, with a bunch of people that like, I don't need to go to school, right? And I'm like, you're wrong. You should go to school. But I just feel like, and maybe this is me. Maybe this is irresponsible. I don't know. But I feel like if parents are going to be irresponsible and not send their children to school, that they should be allowed to be irresponsible and not send their children to school.
It's so hard because it's like, yes, but then you get the kid that doesn't show up to school and they're getting held back. And you're like, as the teacher, you're like, this is so frustrating. Like, I'm going to go pick up your kid on the way to school. Like, I am so done. Yeah. So it's like, because I'm pretty with you with like the overarching mandates. No, and I was also the truancy court kid.
That's true.
Which is, again, ridiculous.
So tell me the story. How did you get to truancy court?
So, I think my parents went to truancy court. I was in elementary school.
You went to truancy court in elementary school.
I'll have to ask them if they actually ended up in truancy court. I know we got a lot of letters, and then they tried to hold me back because I had missed so much school. As some people know, I had a very sick mother as a kid, which was the reason for the not attending school, which I feel like is kind of fair.
Yeah.
With a sick mom.
Yeah.
And it's not like I was failing. I had hundreds and everything. I was in second grade.
Yeah.
And they had to have a meeting with the principal, and the principal sat down and was
You could color like a boss, man. You stayed in the lines and everything.
Yes. Anyway. I could trace those letters.
Okay. So
second grade is harder than that, guys.
You had to have a meeting with the principal.
My parents had a meeting with the principal because they were my teacher was trying to hold me back, and the principal was like, we're not going to hold your kid back. She has hundreds and everything, but please bring her to school.
See, I feel like, and that's the thing, I feel like there should be some sort of, because again, education is a service that is provided for you by the government, right? And again, I think it should be provided by your local government. I do not think the federal government should be involved in it. And again, you might differ. That's fine. But this is not really we're not really talking about education. We just kind of got onto this little pathway here. I feel like if it's a service provided for the government, I feel like they should help, right? Try and find ways to help parents that can't get their kid to school because they're sick or because they work 3 jobs or something like that. I feel like they should do something to help. But if they just don't want to go, it's their kid.
Yeah.
I mean, are you a terrible parent? Sure. But I believe to a certain extent you should allow for people to be terrible.
Such an interesting aspect to that now is that people are getting truancy letters because their kid isn't getting on the computer. So you're like, listen,
good.
This has gotten cut down from, you don't have to drive anywhere. Just wake up, get your kid on a computer. Go back to sleep. We got him from there. Just get him on the computer on their meeting with me.
That's good. Because, I mean, I don't think truancy laws are necessarily the best thing, but if you're going to have them, then this can't change.
Yeah.
You weirdos. Seriously, though, the COVID education is just something that we're kind of figuring out on the fly. And like I said, it's, I have like a panel of people that I want to talk to about that specifically. But it's just, I feel that if you're going to have truancy laws, they need to be enforced. I think the grades need to be enforced. I remember at one point I had a gentleman tell me that he had, he had an assignment, and this was like, so this was a spring assignment. It was right before summer break, because that was the weird thing, is that COVID hit right before summer break, right? It really came into full effect right before summer break. And so, I mean, you're having like finals and stuff like that. And this guy who I know who is teaching elsewhere in Texas, and he called me up and said, Nick, I oversee about 300 students, right, within all my classes and stuff. And I just basically said, hey, I want you guys to write me this paper, and I'll grade the paper as your final. We're not going to have a final test, but I want you guys to turn in something. He says, Nick, I have 300 kids. 9 of those kids turned in anything. They turned in anything at all. Anything. And he looked at me and said, what should I do? And this is why I'm not a teacher, because my response was, fail all of them. You should fail them all. Because they didn't turn in anything. Like, you didn't even turn in a blank document. Right? I did that in college once, and it worked, right? Because the teacher was like, yep, there it is, right?
He did it.
But like, they didn't turn in anything? No, fail them all. Apparently they weren't allowed to do that.
No.
Which, again, this is why there are certain jobs that I would just not be good at. Teacher's definitely one of them, because nobody would pass my class ever. Because I would just constantly be like, you guys are all dumb. Oh, man. Anyway, so that's my rant about education. And we're going to have, this thing is, we're going to have a whole big ol' episode. I might invite you back to have a whole big ol' episode about education. Because I have so many, so many people that I know that are educators or work in education. I have a lady who's a counselor in Louisville. I have a lady who actually is a teacher. I have a lady who's a kindergarten teacher. I have a lady who's a high school teacher, right? So I'd like to, they're all ladies. It's not a comment on the field. It just happens to be the case, right? They're all women. I'd like to have all of these people in and talk kind of just roundtable with them about some of the things that they experience.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be fascinating. Especially now. It really things are wild in education right now.
Yeah, I'd be interested to do that. We'll have to do that soon. That being said, I want to talk to you specifically about the fact that you teach special education people, right? And this has always been an interesting thing for me, because communities are supposed to be the essential organism of our politics, right? Meaning our public affairs. Okay, it's supposed to be the people that you are interacting with on a daily basis, right? And I always make, so my wife loves the show Gilmore Girls. Do you watch Gilmore Girls?
I watched like the first season when I was sick once, and I didn't pick it back up.
I can't stand Gilmore Girls. I can't stand it. It's just so, like, the whole thing is women talk fast. And I'm like, but okay. And I mean, I know there's guys on there and they do the fast talking routine too, but I'm like, that's your whole bit? And you went for like 20 seasons.
It was a long running show.
It was a long running show. And the whole bit is...
Came back.
They came back and did another like season with the older girls. Okay. And so I don't like the show, right? That's just, now I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for that, but I don't like the show. But I always say that true American politics should look a lot like Stars Hollow, which is the town that they live in, which I believe is in Rhode Island.
Wow, Michelle would be so proud that you know Stars Hollow.
Yeah, it's called Stars Hollow, and it's kind of a joke, right? That they have these like city council meetings, and there's this one guy who just takes everything way too seriously, and they all meet in a barn, and it's kind of a joke, but I think that's how. I think that's how politics should be done, right? And I mean, I'm not saying that there's no need for a state or a federal government. I love the state governments, right? I think that there should be some overarching regulations as to how government should run. But the fact is that the purpose of our body politic is to take care of the people who need to be taken care of. There's other reasons, right? You need to protect the citizenry, right? We need to make sure that people can live their lives relatively unmolested, so there's a lot to that, but a big part of it is how we treat those who are most vulnerable, right? How we treat our poor, how we treat those who have health issues, right? How we treat the people, and this really comes into where you are. How do we treat the people who cannot necessarily function on their own in society? And I don't think that can happen at the national level.
No.
Because people will inevitably fall through the cracks. And this is one of the biggest reasons why I want to have you on here, because I've heard you on another podcast. Chloe's been making the rounds, guys. There's a lot of local podcasts that have had her on. I heard you on another one, and I remember you saying something that really spoke to me when it came to this was every kid is different, especially, and every special needs kid is different.
Yes.
And every special set of needs is different, right? So you have this sort of situation where you really can't make one big, broad, sweeping policy to deal with these people. So now that I just told you can't do that, I'm gonna ask you to try and do that.
Oh gosh, yeah.
What is something that you could do now? Not necessarily in Washington, but what is something that the city of Plano could do? Do you feel like that, or what is the biggest problem that you feel like the kids or the people, the special needs people that you encounter on a daily basis, what is the biggest problem that they face and that you think society or community could solve?
Yeah. The kids that I work with, I kind of mentioned earlier, are the higher functioning, when we're talking about the world of special education, are the higher functioning students, where our goal is absolutely for them to be productive, functioning members of society. We want them to go on to hopefully live on their own, or, hold a job, be a contributing member of society, have families, have friendships. Our goal is for them to be as high functioning as possible. And I absolutely believe that all my kids can get to that point. So, I think that a huge thing is the culture surrounding special education. And we've seen a huge shift in that in the last 20 or so years. And I think that it's absolutely moving in a positive direction. But, I always obviously come back to thinking about the school, because that's my community, and that's where we impact, the people around us. And if you think about school, even, back in the 90s, you would have, if 80s or 90s, if you were labeled special ed at all, it was like, oh, you're in your own room. You're not in the general population at all. Like, you're separate. We don't understand you. There's no real education there. And that's not the case now. I think my kids are in the classroom with every other student, with your kid, with Joe Schmo's kid. We're all together. They have times where they're with me, just like they have times where, I was a speech therapy kid, couldn't say CH, SH, or J. So, I would go to speech therapy a couple times a week. It's just like that. My kids are pulled out. Most of the kids don't even know where they're going. They and most of the kids too, because I'm in the classes, really know me and like me. So they don't even like, they're like, oh, can I go with you, Miss Clark? And I'm like, no, it's not.
You have to stay here. Yeah.
But, and so there's absolutely like a culture shift there. And that is due to, some federal regulation. The IDEA Act essentially put into place a least restrictive environment, where you need to have just that, a least restrictive environment for every child. So if you're a kid with a learning disability, you don't need to be in a centralized classroom with kids who might be nonverbal, or those are two completely, like you were saying, every kid is different.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to treat special ed. That act kind of, helped us not treat special ed as just like, all right, go to this room. And, it's, if you only need to be in my class 30 minutes every week for social skills, that's as much as you're going to be in my class,
Yeah.
And then the rest of the time you're with all the other kids. So there's absolutely, I think, a culture shift there in awareness and just kind of normalizing, like, every kid is different, whether you're special ed or not, and the kids are used to being around all different types of kids, and it definitely makes them a lot more tolerant of if, you know, a kid is having a meltdown or a hard time in their class. It's not as like, I don't know, like the kids aren't just sitting there and staring and like freaking out. Like they're more used to different learning styles, different emotional needs of kids. And there's, you know, I think what is interesting, my mom actually asked me, you know, because being in special ed, she's like, do your kids get bullied a lot? Like, are the kids, you know, really picked on? And they're not, you know, and I think that in, you know, my mom was talking about back when she was a kid is like, you know, all sorts of slurs, terrible things being said to these kids, you know, and that doesn't really exist very much. If, you know, if they're upset with my kid, it may be because my kid is actually being a jerk and he needs to stop. Like, it's not because
that's the thing that I mean, you talked about a cultural change. That's the biggest cultural change that I think we can experience is that people with disabilities can be horrible people, and recognizing that, you know, anybody can be a horrible person.
Give them the freedom to be a horrible person.
Gosh,
you know?
what was that? So it was the show. It was another show that actually I don't hate this show. Anyway, Big Bang Theory, right? I don't hate it, but I kind of have that like, this is gonna sound super weird. It's too mainstream. This show's gone too mainstream. Yeah, but so I don't mind the Big Bang Theory, but there was this one episode that featured a deaf woman, right? And the biggest joke was she was clearly taking advantage of one of the men on the show, right? Who was dating her. And she said, "Oh, she wouldn't do that." So her friend Penny, right? Penny said, "Oh, she wouldn't do that. She's deaf." And she goes, "All deaf people are nice," which not true. Not true at all, right? I know more than most people, I would say, right? I know I could probably count them on one hand, but I know several deaf people. Some of them are wonderful people.
Yeah.
Some of them, right? They have kind of this, it's kind of a thing. So I think the realization, because it's got to be kind of dehumanizing as someone who has special needs to be thought that you are somehow incapable of being wrong or behaving badly.
Yes.
Right. And there's I think that's a big shift that we kind of need to go through, because I think you're right. I don't think there's a big issue with people who are disabled being bullied, right? Or being, you know, bullying happens. Bullying happens to all sorts of people, right? But I don't think there's a giant issue with specifically we're mistreating disabled people. I think if anything, it's the other way around. We need to sort of recognize that these are people, and people can be jerks, right? People can have bad opinions and do bad things. So, you know, again, I like the fact that you're pushing. I do like how you cleverly dodged the question.
Well,
because you kind of said it's a cultural thing, so I'm just gonna get off the government train there, and which is fine. I mean, if that's really what you think, but culturally, what besides what we just talked about, just realizing that disabled people can be horrible also. Culturally, what's another sort of vein that you think you could find yourself in? What shift should we go through as a society?
You know, I think that kind of extending off of what I said, not the same thing, but extending, you know, is that, you know, as a cultural shift, being aware of people with disabilities, but not scared of them. Good golly, I think. And you know what? Like before I got into the field, I think that we have all felt that at some point where we're uncomfortable around someone that has a disability. You don't know how to act. You're not sure what to say, you know, and I totally empathize with that. But, you know, that's kind of an area like you got to kind of look yourself in the mirror and like, these are, like we're saying, these are fully human, 100%, full range of emotions, full range of abilities, people, you know, just like you. And so, you know, I think that when kind of moving into the workforce, you know, I think that is something that there need to be equitable opportunities for people with autism, for people with learning disabilities, emotional disabilities to be in the workforce in a full way. And I think that, you know, the kids can get special education services until they're gosh, I should know this, but I believe it is 21. They can get services.
Services like what?
From the school district. Things like it could be extending education where, you know, if you're graduating as a senior, but you're academically not there, you know, it's not being held back. You're not getting held back for your disability, but we're going to continue to provide you with education. But it really starts to be more resources, hopefully trainings, things that we are looking now more at the practical. How are you going to enter the workforce? What are you going to do once you're out of our scope at 21? You know, and I think that there are, you know, some private companies that have had programs that help people with special needs enter the workforce and have a more equitable opportunity. I definitely say equitable because equal, we're not the same person. You know, we're not, and you want to give people with special needs the opportunity to have every chance that I may get.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they should get that chance in take the same path to that chance. Okay. You know, they need to be given accommodations for their differing abilities. Okay. And I think that there are, yes, awareness, but also policies for companies. And, you know more of how that would look like legislatively. And
well, so the path to get there, and I'm going to push back on this just a little bit. So such as what? Because here's the thing. If I have somebody who, and this is kind of a weird comparison, but a person who has Tourette's, right? They can't be a librarian.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. They just can't. No matter how much they want to be, right? There's, there's just a person in a wheelchair can't play in the NBA. I mean, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a certain level of, I understand that we need to make accommodations for individuals. But I'm having trouble, I guess, manifesting what exactly that would look like. Yeah. From whether it's a legislative thing or a private company thing, right? What sort of things what sort of things would you propose, or what vaguely, I guess, would that even look like?
Yeah, I think that's hard because it is definitely per job, you know, and I think that that's kind of where the education system comes in those last years in between high school and when you're out at 21, which again, a lot of kids don't participate in that, but that's where that real training, so we can get you a skill. I think that more what I'm coming at is you don't want, you know, people that are in special education or people with differing abilities can do more than push the shopping carts at Kroger, you know, and Kroger is a great company who has provided that opportunity, and they provide growth and they have programs, but they can do more than that. Maybe someone with Tourette's can't be a librarian, but there are accommodations and programs where it is probably going to need to be more direct training with someone that knows how to work with special needs individuals. But I know when I think of my kids, obviously every time that I talk about special needs, I'm thinking of specific kids in my mind. Yeah. Sometimes they just need direct one-on-one. This is how you're going to learn this skill. And then when they have that skill, man, I mean, I've got a kid that can spit off logo dates, his memory. You literally show him a logo. He's like, that's the 1961 logo of Wendy's. And they changed that. I mean, so I'm like, good grief, kid, you can use that ridiculous memory that you have.
For sure.
You know, it's hard for you to look people in the eyes and it's hard for you to stay focused. But if I could teach you a skill or give you information, I'm always like, he should work at a museum and he should be at an exhibit giving people information, because that kid, you can ask him any question about logos. Yeah. Or Sonic the Hedgehog, and he knows all of it. But if let's say he wants to work at a museum and they do not have some sort of program or ability to train him, you know, in a way that he can learn. Because that's the thing is every kid learns differently. But for the most case, you need more small group one-on-one instruction of things. And that grows as you get older, but that won't necessarily change, you know, and you don't want to be, well, he can't learn, so he can't work here, or I can't teach him. You know what I mean? He watched the training video, so I don't know why he doesn't know how to do X, Y, Z. You know, that's not how it's going to work. So, but there needs to be awareness there that, you know, my kid could probably be a better museum curator than Joe over here, but Joe watched the training video and was able to learn from that.
I think part of that is not even necessarily so. you have to avoid, obviously you have to avoid undue burden, right? For example, I used to work, and the example that was given to me, I used to work at a local Y, and somebody described undue burden to me, and they said, well, if somebody, for example, for whatever reason can't get to the front door, we're not going to blow out a wall so that they can come in, right? And so, and I mean, obviously that's an extreme example, but I feel like the best thing to do would be to find ways, and we do this with people. We do this with people regardless of ability or disability, right? We do this with individuals all the time. We should find ways to discover what they're good at, and then steer them towards things that are going to make that are going to involve those skills, right? For example, we started this by me saying that I would never be a good teacher because all children hate me, right? Or that's not true, but if were I a teacher,
oh, shoot, I have a kid.
Were I a teacher, yeah, I do. I have a child, and he loves me, and I love him. I will never be his teacher, which is good because he would hate me, right? I mean, the fact is, I wouldn't be a good teacher. Maybe not. I mean, not of children, right? Or of high school children, right? Because that just doesn't play within my skill set.
Yeah.
Right. You could probably do anything, but that's you're unique, right? Your husband could never do anything that involves knowledge of anything other than super nerdy stuff. Right? So
could not be a sportscaster.
He couldn't be a sportscaster.
I'd probably have a better shot at that than he would.
I would never watch him. Never, right? I'm not going to watch him.
Maybe a good comedy show.
I'm not going to watch him talk about the Cubs, right?
Yeah.
Partially because I hate the Cubs. And I'm sorry.
And I'm walking out the door. And the
that's
podcast
not
is
true.
over.
I don't hate the Cubs. I you guys won. Congratulations. You're done now. Let somebody else.
We're gonna win again.
Let somebody else be in the spotlight. Let the Rangers be in the spotlight. Okay, but the fact is that he would never be a sportscaster because that doesn't fall in his skill set.
Yeah.
That doesn't interest him. So what I'm saying is that we do this to a certain level already with people who are not considered disabled.
Yeah.
I think that programs that worked towards that would be better.
Yeah.
I think if we could find a way to incentivize that.
Yeah.
And again, I can't stress this enough. This can't happen at the federal level.
No.
This has to be an individual thing.
Yeah, which I think is where I get stuck in. Like, when I'm thinking about these opportunities, I'm like, I struggle to see how we can, how even the local government, let's talk like city of Plano, what could they do? Because I'm thinking more like, oh, what could this private company do? Or what could the education system do? Which would be, the city of Plano still. But, I'm thinking more private programs and, important churches, people in their life that would know what they're interested in and could guide them. You know what I mean? Like, how is there... because I think about making things more accessible, like generally their daily life, but when I'm thinking career field, I guess, how do we steer them? But I also think that, it is important, like, I want to give my kids equitable opportunities, but I think kind of like we were saying earlier, you can also you can be a jerk and have disabilities. Like, you cannot be skilled at something, not because you have disabilities, but because it's not what you're good at.
It's not what you're good
you know
at,
what I
yeah.
mean? And so you want to definitely be sure, but be sure that you're giving them opportunities to figure out that's not what they're good at. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So you mentioned private companies. Where do you think this is going to really be most effective? Do you think it's going to have to be private companies, or do you think that cities can lay out basic ordinances that say, yeah, we're going to do this in order to be inclusive, or is this something that's going to happen at the more or less micro level of individual companies, and in some cases individual stores, right? Because you mentioned Kroger. Kroger definitely does have certain programs, but it is the specific stores that carry them out.
Yeah.
So which do you think would be more effective? Do you think this should be a privatized thing, or do you think that there should be some public community program that would facilitate that?
I I think that it's most effective at the private level. I'm trying to think if it would be. I'm just thinking out loud. This is something, I think that I like this conversation. It's definitely pushing my brain to go kind of farther than I've gone. Cause like I said, I work with 9 to 12-year-olds.
Yep.
So my thought is more, what's the central idea of the story? Let's make sure we're looking people in the eyes when we talk to them.
Yeah.
So, I think, but as, obviously, I think that companies, we keep using Kroger as an example, but I know that they have programs. I think that that's great. And I think that private companies, I guess I'm thinking like, would it be something that the city of Plano could say, any company that has over this many people needs to have a program, to train people with disabilities, or needs to have XYZ so that it's equitable for people with disabilities, But at the same time, like, I think that I kind of also come back to like physically, like physical disabilities. Like, I've struggled with physical disabilities in my life. And I think about when I was in a wheelchair, I couldn't have been doing a job where I needed to do heavy lifting, but how do you within companies? Because, I've definitely, not calling out companies, but there's a company that I was working for, and the college, gosh, I have thoughts, that definitely treated me unfairly due to my disability and did not have programs in place.
Okay.
And it was wildly frustrating because I was not being given an equitable opportunity to do the work that I could do. And I had to meet the same standard as completely healthy people. And granted, my disability was physical.
Yeah.
When the actual work, it was in college, it was attendance. For my program, we could only miss 2 days. I was very, very sick. So I needed a little bit more than 2 days. I was still absolutely able to do the job, but there was the program was so new that they were like, oh my God, you have a disability. We don't know what to do with that, you know? And the college itself did not have a overarching rule or policy. That's what I'm looking, policy as to with attendance, what to do in, for XYZ. And so I guess I'm taking that and thinking, should the local government have an overarching policy as to what to do with XYZ, or does that need to be just a local, the problem is I try and think about
this was college you were talking about.
I was talking about college. Yeah.
Not high school.
No. And I try to think about, I want my kids to have the most opportunities possible. If you keep it just to local, will that mean they only have 1 or 2 companies they can work with? Like if there is an ordinance that the city could give where programs need to be in place.
So here's my idea.
I'm just thinking out loud. Yeah.
Well, because it's fine. But so my sister also struggles from a physical disability, right? And her college was unbelievably accommodating. I mean, they specifically rewrote the regulations that they have to accommodate her.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is because they wanted, they got a big story in the paper about it, and it was a really cool thing that they did for their community, and it was seen as a very special thing that they did. But I think it is a private thing, and part of me says, well, you could just go to another college. But that's not always necessarily the case. Sometimes you've got specific scholarships or things that play into that. But I think if there is a government role, I don't think it's with regulation. I think it's with advocacy. And here's what I mean. First of all, I hate regulation. The word regulation makes me go, I don't like it. It gives me goosebumps, right? Now, regulation are in certain cases necessary. I do grant that. I don't necessarily think they should have a quota. I don't think you should say, I don't think government should say you must have this many people who have disabilities within your company if you have more than this many, overall employees. I don't like that. What I think you should do, right? What I think you should do, because I always look at government from a service perspective, right? That's the thing that we need to look at. Government is a service industry. It's not a regulatory industry. I know a lot of us tend to think that it might be, but if the government's going to have a role, here's what I think it should be. I think you should find ways to incentivize companies, maybe with tax breaks or things like that, for employing more
diverse.
Diverse needs, right? Special needs community. And then the other thing I think you should do is I think you should have a separate government program, somebody who is very much like a social worker.
Yeah.
And their job is, and I know that there might be something like this out there that already exists, and you can tell me if there is, right? But your job is specifically to lobby companies on behalf of people with special needs.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your student who is really good with the logos.
Yeah.
You should have somebody whose job it is to know this person, know what jobs they would be good at, why they would be good at that, and then make the case for those people.
Yeah.
Right? So they go to the museums and they say, listen, this guy's got an incredible memory. This guy, he might not necessarily be the best person for interaction. I wouldn't have him work at a gift shop, but he would be amazing at X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And you should advocate for them being the best candidate. That's the thing, because I think so many of us say, well, they need it because they're disabled. No, I think what you should do is you should look at this unique person, look at this individual, find out what they would be great at, and then sell them.
Yeah.
Right. Because the fact is that if you're saying, well, you have to have a certain number of disabled people, then they're always the sort of affirmative action hire, right? At the company, they're always the person. Now, and I understand that there are people out there who they just don't have the mental faculties to be, to be a great contributor to society, right? You're gonna have people that are gonna be dependent on their parents probably for their entire lives, right? You're gonna have people that they're just at that level where they need a special level of care.
Yeah.
But in the cases that you're talking about, these people seem like yes, they have certain things that they're just really not good at, but they also have things that they're amazing at. And you should be pushing that. You should be showing these people, listen, if you hire this person, he's going to be better at this than any other person that you can have, disability or no disability, right? That's where I think it is. And if the government, which I believe it does, I believe that especially local governments have a role in caring for those of us who are most vulnerable in society, and for removing a lot of that vulnerability. And I think that if you had somebody that could do that, then that would be good.
Yeah.
That's the best solution I could come up just here on the spot, sitting on the couch.
Well, I mean, that was better than anything that I had thought of. So I mean, no, that sounds great. And I think that, I guess that's I think that goes along with what I'm saying, like we want equitable opportunities. Like I feel that I am good at advocating for myself. And if I go to an interview, I'm really good at that. That's not a need that I have, but that might be a need that Sally has, is that she is great at this, but she needs help with someone advocating for her. She doesn't have that social skill. And I think I really like that, because I think that we all have things that we could grow in and that we're amazing at. Yeah. But for most of my kids, the thing they could grow in is those social skills, especially. A lot of my kids have full abilities academically. And I mean, gosh, I've got kids, again, these kids just astound me. They're like, oh, do you know what happened on November 18th, 1983? And I'm like, I actually don't.
I was not alive.
And they're like, oh, Adam Driver was born that day. And I'm like, didn't know that, but you did. And that's wildly impressive.
Is that really when Adam Driver was born?
I'm almost positive. Yes, it was November 18th, 1983, because I was talking to my kid about it this week, because it was Adam Driver's birthday.
And here you were talking about your memory. I'm going to look that up. I'm going to call you on that if you're wrong.
Dude, I'm telling you, November 18th, 1983.
Okay, keep
Adam
talking.
Driver was born.
Keep talking. I got you.
But, so again, and that's especially, you get a lot of times with kids who are on the autism spectrum, wild memories that can be used in such amazing ways, but they need help with the social skill. Did I get it? I'm looking at your
Adam
face.
Driver was born November 19th.
No!
1983.
No!
I'm showing
My
it
kids
right
would be
here.
so disappointed in me.
They would be so... Miss Clark, you have failed.
Failed me.
You have failed by a day.
A day. Sorry, Adam Driver.
Which, that means his birthday was yesterday.
Yes, that's why the discussion came up.
So
It was because it's Adam Driver's birthday this week.
okay.
These are what we talk about.
These are the things we talk about.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's where it lies in
Yeah.
advocacy and maybe incentivizing.
I
right?
think, yeah, that's an
which I think you should
interesting-
incentivize with tax breaks if you're going to incentivize. Right, those of you who are local, we're going to talk about taxes here in a little bit.
Yeah.
Those of you who are local governors out there, tax breaks are the best incentives. Not giving money. Right, it's not a good idea to take money from other people and give it to corporations. You just give the corporations a
Just
tax break.
Steal from us less.
Tax breaks. Oh my gosh, we have another taxationist theft person. So one of my other guests, I know her very well. Jordan is a wonderful person, and I remember hearing her say. She came back from one day with her first. She had just moved to the area and she had gotten her first paycheck as a nurse, and she saw how much had gone to even in Texas where there is no state income tax.
Yeah.
So it's all federal income
Yes.
tax. And she comes in and goes, "Oh my gosh, income tax is theft!" Right? And this was years ago, right? But I remember actually it wasn't years ago. It was more like a year ago. But I brought her in and I said, "I'm not getting you off this couch until you say." Income taxes theft, and it did. It ended up happening. That being said, so I think that that's the form of incentive that you should provide, if you're going to provide incentives at all. And then really you're going to you need to have somebody advocating because and at that point you are talking about equality rather than equity because that's what everybody has to do.
Yeah.
Everybody has to everybody has to sell themselves. You know what people that aren't good at selling themselves do? They hire an agent.
Yeah.
Right, they find someone who
hiring
can
company,
sell
yeah.
them, right? And so really you are getting more into the equality because you're kind of saying, hey, giving you the same opportunity, we're not necessarily going to give you a free pass. We're going to find somebody who can sell you as the best candidate. And I think that's really where it is, and that kind of removes again some of the stigma, some of the social stigma that comes from it. But I think it is a cultural thing, which is good because the purpose of this show, again, is to talk about individuals and local communities. And that's where culture is made.
Yeah.
Culture is not driven by politics. If anything, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Right? Politics is very much driven by culture. And culture is made, I mean, it's made in the trenches of politics. It's made in the little microcosms, like the city of Plano, right? Like, such and such hamlet out in Lovin County, Texas, right?
Yeah.
That's where culture is bred and made and developed. It's done in churches. It's done in local Lions clubs. It's done at YMCA's. I mean, it's a thing that's bred from person to person. And so I think that makes caring for people with special needs uniquely difficult because it is so individualistic, and you are going to have somebody that knows these people on an individual level and can sell them on an individual level or can work with them like you do on an individual level. But it also makes it, I think it's good because the only way that we're going to solve it is on the ground, right?
Yeah.
There's no way that you can do it with the sort of big brother government.
Yeah, no. And I love that idea of advocacy as well, because I think that my number one role as their teacher, in my personal belief, is to believe in them and advocate for them. Second to that is teaching them. It's to be their partner in crime. It's to be their confidant. It's to advocate for them. It's to build a strong relationship with them. And then I'll teach you long division, and so it's,
Which, by the way, you're talking about people with special needs. I can't do long division. If you gave me a long division problem, I'd be like, I have no idea how to do
gotta
that.
tell you, teaching long division is a difficult concept.
That's what calculators are for.
I know.
I'm sure that if I sat there and thought about it long enough, I could probably bring it back. But oh god,
The best is when you ask a kid a math problem. One of our virtual kids,
Yeah.
he's gotten really good at he's looking at the computer and he tries to have it where you can't tell that he's going to another tab and typing in the calculator.
Yep.
But you can see the light shift on his face.
Yep.
And I'm like, you can't use the calculator on this problem. I need you to show me your work. He's looks like a deer in headlights.
Oh my gosh.
But I think that my biggest thing with all my kids just as a teacher is I freaking believe in you and I love you, and one of my biggest anxieties as a teacher is who's going to be your next teacher? Like when you're not with me, I want so desperately for you to be with someone that feels the same way I feel, because I truly believe it's the best path to success for my special needs kids is that confidant, that encourager, that person that believes in you so that you can then believe in yourself, you know? And so I'm like, oh my God, but what if you don't have that? So I love the thought of like, if there was a role like that, having the peace of knowing that there's that opportunity for my kids. And maybe they won't be as intense as I am, which I don't blame them. I'm really intense with my love. But, you know, someone that is going to believe in my kids and help them other than their own mother, you know, other than their best friend. Like someone that's going to help advocate for them.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as a special needs teacher, one of my biggest anxieties is just what's going to happen when you leave my classroom, because I can only control my classroom, you know?
Yeah. So on a cultural level, do you think, and this is kind of a sidebar a little bit, I guess, but on a cultural level, do you think that there's too much sensitivity about special needs? Because I will tell you, I mean, even in this podcast, I've said some things where I'm like, wow, people might hate me for saying, you know what I mean? For saying things like, you know, not all deaf people are nice, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, or not all people with disabilities are nice. I'm like, are people going to be like, wow, you're a terrible person?
You're awful.
I feel like maybe this oversensitivity is contributing to some of the cultural problem.
Yeah, I think yes and no. I think that it's good to be aware, because I think it was a big shift because the special needs community for the majority of our country's history has been treated like garbage, and it's been terrible. So I think that once we kind of went, oh no, we've been treating these people terribly, it's like, oh my gosh, you can't say anything, you know what I mean? Like, let's go to the complete opposite end of this, which I think is what we do with a lot of things. So yes and no. I think that is a way better path than let's bully all the special needs kids. You know what I mean? I think that I would strongly prefer that. But I think that the one thing is that I think the blanket statements, you know, even positive blanket statements, you're not giving my kids permission to be kids, to be people, you know? And I think that when you have relationships with people that are special needs, you understand so much, like, you are just a person like me, you know what I mean? Like you are, man, like I feel that too, you know, like when my kids are having anxiety, I'm like, yeah, I get that. Like same. And so I think that, you know, by tiptoeing, you know, and again, I don't want to make it sound like it's okay to be a jerk to people with special needs. Absolutely not. I would so much rather you tiptoe than be a jerk. But by tiptoeing, I think you're also not giving yourself the freedom to have relationships with people with special needs. Like it's just very like this sensitivity towards all special needs and, oh, don't say that. But like, also I'm uncomfortable being around. Like it's this kind of anxiety around special needs. And I think that like have a relationship with a special needs person. You know what I mean? Like they are just people. Was my kid a jerk to me today? Yeah. Do they also have autism? Yeah. Like.
So I think about the other thing about it's not just the social sort of blanket statements, which are bad, but also what I think of is I think we have a tendency to coddle people with special needs where they don't necessarily need to be coddled. Now, obviously, and I mean, you can relate to this as an educator, obviously that there are certain special needs that need to be accommodated.
Yes.
But
accommodated and coddling, very different.
There's a big difference.
But there's a thin line sometimes.
I remember thinking about Oscar Pistorius. Do you know who Oscar Pistorius is?
I do not.
So Oscar Pistorius is the South African track runner that has no legs. And you'll recall, and by the way, talk about people with special needs being horrible people. There's allegations that Oscar Pistorius, I think, murdered his girlfriend.
Oh. Oscar, no.
Yeah. So Oscar, not the biggest, but for what it's worth, the dude ran in the Olympics and didn't have any legs.
Yeah.
And there was this big controversy about whether or not his mechanical legs were going to give him an advantage. And there's all this different stuff. But he did very well. I think he medaled. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I remember about him. And I remember hearing the story about his mother and how his mother, who had two sons, one of them had full functioning limbs.
Yeah.
And she had Oscar, who didn't have his two legs. And the thing was, if his brother climbed a tree, his mother would make him go climb the tree. He said, put your legs on and go climb that tree, right? If his brother went and played baseball, she would make him play baseball. And so there's this concept, and I used to, way back in another lifetime, I used to be a swim coach, and I also volunteered to teach the special needs team. And I remember feeling very much the same way of, I don't care if you have special needs. I want you to swim as fast as you can because we are here to swim as fast as we can. We are here to compete at the highest level that we possibly can.
Yeah.
And I will not accept excuses from anyone, let alone people with special needs. And I don't know. I feel like, now, granted, I think that just about everybody's coddled in modern society. I mean, to be honest, I don't think this is an exclusively special needs problem.
Yeah.
But I think that it gets exacerbated when we get to that part of the community.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think, we can't grow in our comfort zone. How are my kids going to grow if they're being coddled? I think that when I think about my students, I have to know where their limits are, because I'm not going to be like, why weren't you in that conversation with 5 people being a super active participant, making everybody laugh? Joe made everybody laugh. How come you didn't make everybody laugh? That's not, that's because
Why can't you be like Joe?
Because you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? I probably could make everybody laugh. Maybe I'm not as funny as Joe. You know what I mean? Because again, we're just getting down to personhood.
Yeah.
But I think, I think that part of that again comes back to like, I believe that you can get here. You got to believe that you can get here. And then I'm also not going to be like, we're not going to be content until you can get there. And I think the big thing that I do with my kids is they set their own goals each day. I have kids that check in with me in the morning and set their goals for the day. This is a goal of mine. And I'm not content until you meet that goal. Yes. One of my kids' goals is, he struggles with, he'll give silly answers is what he calls them. Yeah. I'll be like, what's 50 divided by 10? I don't know. And then he'll go, okay, that was one silly answer. I said, okay. And his goal is only 2 silly answers. And he knows.
2 silly answers.
Yes.
Okay.
And he knows.
But that's the goal that he set.
That's the goal that he set.
Good.
He wants only 2 silly answers because he knows that he gets himself in trouble when he's running around the room saying, I don't know. And then, and so he came to that realization and we said, okay, only 2 silly answers. If he gives me more than 2 silly answers, we're in trouble. You're not meeting your goal. Like, because I expect that. It's not, I understand that that's a really hard thing for you to control. And don't worry about it, baby. We're going to, we'll work on it tomorrow.
Yeah.
As much as sometimes I want to do that because maybe that'd be easier, it's going to be, no, you didn't get your points for this. We have it split up by period. I'm sorry, you're not on green for math. You gave me 50 silly answers in math. Yeah. Your goal was 2. Did we meet that goal? No. Yeah. Okay, then we don't get our points.
I do that with my son a lot too.
Yeah.
It's like, listen, we agreed you would only poop yourself 5 times today. This is number 7. So we're not on track here.
You are not meeting the expectation.
You've got to get this together, right? For those of you that don't know, my son's 5 months old. So
when are you gonna stop,
maybe starting a tad early. That being said, when he was born, I told my wife that he'd be working in a sheet metal factory in 2 weeks, and apparently that was wildly inappropriate to say. Nonetheless, I think that's a good thing. So I like this topic for this show specifically for that reason, because it is so individual. But we also need to be practical. We need to be pragmatic on this show. Was one of the things I've committed to when I started this program was we would talk theoretical with my guest or by myself. I've done this. I've done a couple of lonely podcasts, right? And then I would break down into practical and let's talk about some things that are actually happening and some things that actually are affecting your life. Because you live, you don't live in Plano, but because you work in the great city of Plano. Yeah. Yes. Let's talk a little bit about the Plano City Council. So making a big shift here into, again, the more practical side of the podcast. Chloe, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Did you vote in the last election?
I did vote in the last election.
You did?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you who you
I
voted
was going to say,
for,
you're going to ask me who?
but I'm going to ask you who you voted for in a very different way.
Okay.
Meaning, did you vote down the ticket all the way?
I did.
You did? Mm-hmm. Very good. Now, did you research any of those candidates?
I researched one.
Very good. That is fantastic. Gold star for you. Woo. We have met our goal for the day. One of the thing is
Yeah.
that that's one of the things that I really do advocate for
Yeah.
is research your candidates, research all your candidates. That being said, the election's over, and I'm very, very sad because there was so much content to go through. There were so
Yeah.
many local elections that we got to cover, and they're done now.
Yeah.
And we did our recap, so now I have to work harder, and I don't like it. That being said, and another thing that's been very difficult is, again, this show is, and I can't say I've said this 1,000 times, the show is not about the federal government.
Yeah.
But it is so hard to not talk about the federal government right now
yeah.
because this is
it is 2020.
crazy. This is crazy.
Kooky dukes.
I haven't watched television in a year because this has been the most entertaining. From a political perspective, this has been the most entertaining year imaginable.
Yeah.
And it's just getting better. It's just getting better and better and better. Anyway, so it's been super hard not to talk about it, but we're going to talk about the Plano City Council. Do you know when the Plano City Council meets, Chloe?
November 19th, 1983. Adam.
Not true. They
the only date.
They are going to meet on November 23rd.
That was my second.
That was your second guess. I believe you. So November 23rd, because they meet on the first or the second and fourth Mondays of the month. And that's when they come up with various city ordinances. Actually, on the 23rd, I'm going to be watching the city council meeting, as I encourage all of you to do. Find out when your city council meets. During the time of COVID, it's actually gotten a lot easier because they're meeting virtually. And you can just jump into the call. Now, you're not allowed to say anything, but, you're not allowed to say anything and have people hear you on the call, right? But you can just...
all you want on mute.
You can jump in, you can listen. Most of these municipalities provide their minutes, right? So they talk about the agenda for the day, they talk about the ordinance that were passed, and all of this is public record. I highly advise that you go look into it for the areas either that you live in or that you work in or the surrounding areas so that you know what's going on a local level. And we'll talk a little bit about October because November's not done yet. And I did look at the ordinances, the various Plano ordinances that were passed in October. And really, I kind of looked all throughout the year. This is something I find very disturbing, right? Because when I think of city council, okay, how many laws do you think a city council should pass in a year?
Oh.
Just round ballpark it. What do you, Chloe Clark, what do you think is an appropriate number of city ordinances in the average year? Let's take 2020 out of it.
Okay.
Average year. How many laws should a city pass?
The laws that they are passing.
The ordinances that they're issuing, which at a municipal level they're called ordinances.
Okay.
All right. How many ordinances should they pass?
Let's say 15.
15 in a year. Cool. Well, would it interest you to know,
Oh no.
Mrs. Chloe Clark, that I looked at the records, and Plano seems to pass between 10, on average, 10 and 16 ordinances a month.
Oh, a month.
They're producing that.
I was sitting there for a second like, I got
No, you
close.
didn't. You didn't get it right at all. Not even a little bit right, which in my opinion is way too many things.
a lot.
Like there's just not that. And I mean, I could be wrong. I've not worked in city government. I should. I mean, I should probably get a little bit more informed, especially because I run this show on the intricacies of running a city. But it just seems to be like there's not
like a
that much
lot.
stuff. That's a lot. A month? Are you kidding? Like in
Seems like
June,
you'd be working really hard. Like,
Yeah,
guys,
in
we're
June,
only
I think-
at 8. We have the meeting in a few days. Let's come up with a few more.
In June, I think there were 18. Now, in fairness, a lot of these laws are revisions to other laws or, updates and things of that nature. So a lot of these kind of, they're not new laws that they're coming up with, but still, I look at that and I go, this is just way too much for the government.
This is a lot of government.
This is a lot of government. I don't like it. Oh, no, that's not true. I like government. I just think you should do it appropriately. Nonetheless, let's talk about something that happened in October.
Yeah.
Because, again, the ordinances for November are not out because November's not yet over. One thing that did happen, this has to do with COVID-19, is they revised one of the things that they were doing to assist people who had lost their job during COVID, right? So they were providing things, living assistance essentially for people who had lost their jobs in COVID, which, by the way, I think is the most appropriate thing for the government to be doing. Because if you are going to close everything down, right? If you're going to say we can't go to work, okay, then it's kind of appropriate to incentivize us to not do that by providing us with some assistance, right? This is one of the moments where I think government spending is actually kind of appropriate. That being said, we'll talk about the level of government spending that occurred, but basically Collin County. So this was actually a joint commission of the cities in Collin County, which is parts of Dallas, and McKinney and Plano, and so that whole general North Texas area, that's Collin County. Now, big county in Texas, big population in Collin County, right? You're talking about basically the northeastern half of the DFW, or the northeastern quarter of the DFW Metroplex. So a lot of people there, but they provided assistance to people who had lost their jobs because of COVID, and so it doesn't expire until the end of the year. So it expires December 30th, which I don't know why not December 31st, but it expires December 30th, 2020. I don't know why you just didn't go the extra. Not that extra day.
No.
That's for daddy. Right? That extra day. That's for big man right here, right? Yeah, they're holding out on us a day. No, but it ends December 30th, 2020. But in October, they revised it to do a couple of things. One, to update the budget that they had, right? Because they received, right, because of the CARES Act, which was the government act that gave out money to not just individuals. I don't know if anyone received their COVID money, right? But there were individuals that got it. There were also companies that received it in order to make payroll, and there were counties in the United States that actually received money.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So there was a lot of money. And it went to a lot of different places. There were counties that were able to distribute the money based on the people that needed it, which I like. I think that was a good, appropriate way to divvy out that money. Give it to the county, then the county can give it out to the individuals based on the needs that they actually have. That was good. That was appropriate. Now, this is where I get a little... Okay. How much money do you think Collin County got?
Oh Lord, I have no idea.
From the federal government. How many federal tax dollars do you think Collin County got? Just give me a ballpark. What do you think?
1.2 mil.
1.2 mil.
Yeah.
$30 million.
For just Collin County.
$30 million went to a county, which I'm sitting here going, what? Now, in fairness, I think we spent something like $6 trillion, which is just an ungodly number, right? $6 trillion, I think the federal government spent, but 30 million of it went to Collin County, which just gives you an indication, right? So one of the things that they did was they updated it. Now, here's the thing, Chloe. Currently, the balance of that fund is standing somewhere at about $19 million. Okay. Which, do a little bit of math, talking about somewhere around 11 million has been spent. Now, this happened in June.
So from June to October.
From June to October.
Okay.
Right? So from June to October, you're talking about June, July, August, September, and then we'll say October, right? So that's 5 months.
Yeah.
Okay? It ends in December, which means we got 2 months left, and we still have 2/3 of the money that was still sitting in the coffers. Yeah. My question is, and this will be something that I'm not allowed to ask a question because you have to apply to ask a question at these meetings.
Yeah.
My question is, where's the other 2/3 of that money going?
Yeah.
What happens when it expires? What are you going to do to it? Are you going to reinvest it in the community? Or are you going to give it back to the federal government?
Yeah.
What happens to that additional money? I don't know. I might have to do a little bit of research to figure it out. But we're still sitting on $19 million.
That's a lot of dollars.
The taxable revenue in Collin County in a year is like 1/3 of that. Yeah. That's ridiculous. Anyway, that's all I'm saying. Now, again, if there was ever a time to spend exorbitant amounts of money, COVID, you could make a good case. Yeah, you could make a case that COVID in 2020 in general might be the place to do it.
Yeah.
But still, that just makes me, I don't like it. $30 million, they updated it to include the current balance, which is just under 19 mil. The other thing they did, and this is a really interesting thing, is they took Dallas, right? Because Dallas because Dallas is a part of Collin County. Certain parts of Dallas.
Yep.
Now, there's obviously parts of Dallas which are in Dallas County, which you would think all of Dallas would be in Dallas County, right?
But
no, yeah, and actually certain parts of Dallas are in Denton County, depending on where you are. So
I used to live in Dallas, and I was in Denton County.
and you were in Denton County.
Yes.
So there's a lot of counties that kind of converge in Dallas, and there are certain parts of Dallas that are in Collin County. Well, what Collin County did was they took this program and they said, okay, we're going to give it to all of Collin County. And then they amended it in October to say, okay, all of you in Dallas who are also in Collin County, you're kicked out. You don't get any of this money. They just booted all of the people that live in the city of Dallas and Collin County. You do not qualify for this aid anymore because Collin County are savages. They're all savages because you live in Dallas.
My gosh.
Now, in fairness, the case is because the city of Dallas actually has its own CARES program, and they're going to benefit that, so they don't want people double dipping. You could make that case. I'd have to look at the Dallas City Council and see exactly how much money they received, which I feel like they got. If Collin County got 30 million, the city of Dallas, even if the city of Dallas got another 10 million, I'd still be like, what?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. But they kicked them out because Dallas has its own program. Still, I think that's if you live in Dallas, it's got to sting because McKinney still gets it. Frisco, Plano, all these people. But not the Dallas people. The Dallas folks just got kicked out of that ordinances. Yeah. And so really, that was one of the things that happened at not the last meeting, but the
October.
The meeting before. So the last meeting in October, which the last meeting that happened was 2 Mondays ago.
Okay.
And so the 2 Mondays after that was when they decided to pass this particular ordinance, which is just. So if you live in Dallas and you are part of the part of Dallas that's in Collin County, you need to write some people because that is cabbage, man. I would be so mad. Now I actually live currently in Dallas, but I live in Dallas and Denton County, like you did. Yep. So I'm gonna have to look and see if Denton County's pulling any shenanigans like that, which I wouldn't qualify for anyway because I didn't lose my job. But still, man, that just burns. Now, what do you think overall about how? I mean, did you get a COVID check?
Oh yeah,
you did.
Yep.
So your household got a COVID check.
Yes.
Do you think that was appropriate to spend that money on people because of COVID?
I'm trying to even remember what I spent it on. I think we just put it. Yeah, we put it in savings because we're adopting. So that was actually really nice. I was like, okay, I will take this extra, however much money I got.
Yep.
And we will just stick that in savings and pretend that it never happened. I mean, at the beginning of COVID, Hayden was working a different job, and that ended up dissolving. So it has definitely helped. Do I think that it was appropriate? I'm not sure. Like selfishly, because you know what I mean? Like you get money, you're like, yes, this is appropriate. Give me more.
Yeah.
Yeah, But should the government be sending out COVID checks
to the tune of $6
trillion? And again, I guess I feel like I see more. Let's give it to businesses for payroll. Okay. Yeah. We need to pay people.
Yeah.
And
on a national level, that makes more sense because there are national corporations,
yes.
right? Walmart does not exist just in one city. and certainly, I mean, I'm sure its headquarters, I don't know where Walmart's headquarters are. But for example, I know Amazon's headquarters are in Crystal City, which is in New Jersey, New York area, right? The city of New Jersey does not have enough money to bail out Amazon, right? So if anyone is going to do that, the federal government might have a role in that.
Yeah.
But to individuals, I think if those checks are going to be paid out, it's got to be done at the city level, or maybe the state level.
The state level,
but
yeah.
Nick,
I was thinking maybe the state level.
What about some states that don't have the budget for that because they're irresponsible with their money? Move, go to a better state. Go to a better state or go to a better city, right? That's what I've always been an advocate of voting with your feet, right? And going to another place,
voting
but I just don't think in a country that was built on the idea of federalism, I don't think people here in Texas should be paying money for people who live in Michigan necessarily. I think that should be done on a state by state level. And of course, that's kind of a heartless thing to say. I feel like, you should be,
Yeah,
you
it's
should be a
hard.
good neighbor.
It's such an extenuating circumstance that it's like,
yeah.
in the middle of a pandemic, should the federal government? I'm kind of like, well, I mean, if it's ever going to happen,
Yeah, if that was ever going to happen,
it's
this is
now.
the
You know what
this
I
is
mean?
definitely
Like
the right
this,
time.
it does seem like if there's an appropriate time,
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic would
Yeah.
be the time. You know?
I think responsible city governments have coffers that they should be putting money into for situations like this.
I think now they definitely will.
Now they definitely will.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, say what you want about 2020. 2020 is going to cause a lot of people to get their mess together.
Yes.
It's going to cause a lot of cities to get their mess together. You could
A lot of individuals
a lot
to
of
get their
individuals
mess
to get your
together.
mess
Like
together,
the amount
right?
that
I
was
mean,
taken for granted.
the fact is one of the great things about my wife and I is that we've been very diligent with our saving, and so we had money to get us through when I lost a lot of my business. I didn't lose my job entirely, but I lost a good chunk of my business, and we had enough money to get us through
Yeah.
that. So we ended up giving our COVID check away.
Yeah.
We just gave it to other individuals. I'm not saying that to brag on myself, like, look how awesome I am. I'll do that another time.
you do that plenty.
But what I'm saying is yeah, I do that plenty enough already, right? But what I'm saying is that fiscal responsibility matters on an individual level, and I feel like some good will have come of this if people can learn, hey, no, you really do need to make sure that you're being fiscally responsible.
Yeah, you need to make sure you've got
and that's
3
not
to 6 months living expenses in your savings account.
yeah,
at
and
least.
an individual level on an individual level that's great. On a local level, that's also a good idea.
yeah.
It's also a good idea because that's where the money should be coming from. And so,
Well, and I think if you look too, even at churches, a lot of churches have gone under because people aren't tithing. Once people stopped coming to church, a lot of people just stopped coming to church. They'd stopped tithing and things like that, and so a lot of churches went under. The churches that didn't go under were the churches that were responsible with their money.
That's very true.
Were the ones that had savings and backup plans.
That's right.
And so
savings and backup plans is always a good thing, friends. Well, Mrs. Clark, sorry about that. Mrs. Clark.
I was offended. I'm glad
I
you
know.
fixed it.
Your husband's right outside. I expect him to go, Mrs. Right. That being said, Mrs. Clark, we've gone a bit over time. That's fine. We've had a lot of good content today, but the people probably need a break from me. Certainly, maybe not from you. So, any final thoughts? Any closing arguments that you're going to make before we get out of here?
No, I mean, just, treat everybody like people, man.
everybody like
we're all people.
All right, friends. Well, you heard it right from the mouth of Mrs. Clark. People are people.
People are people. That sounds like a Dr. Seuss. People
Yes.
are people.
People are people.
No matter how simple.
Dr. Seuss. When you don't have the word, make one up.
Make one up.
All right, friends. Well, people are people. Dr. Seuss is weird. Your local matters.